organizations and the other voluntary agencies, they're called NGOs today, non-governmental organizations, to set up the sponsorship system. That was more of a system than anything governed by law itself. I think there may have been some regulations put into place about how long refugees could stay on public assistance, and I think that was about 3 years, and how much money they would get initially, these agencies that were resettling them, for each refugee that they resettled. But I don't think any of those were laws per se in the legal sense of the word. So I think it was more of inventing as we went along and encouraging the maximum support from private sector agencies, whether religious or non-governmental.
Okay. Do you have another question?
What barriers did you face
as you were helping them escape or to leave?
I'm sorry, I missed that. Say again, please.
Okay, I think Emily's trying to ask, what barriers did you face as you were trying to help the refugees leave Indochina and get to other countries?
Well, we faced barriers both within the executive departments of the government and outside in the Congress. People were not so keen to have this flow continue, and a number of us younger officers pushed very hard to have this continue, and we worked closely with the media, as I was saying just a minute ago, and that didn't make us too popular with the bureaucracy. I don't think any of us found that our work with refugees was career enhancing in those days. We weren't so popular with the bureaucracy. I can remember people at the embassy in Bangkok, where we had a very supportive ambassador at the time, a fellow by the name of Morton Bromwitz, but even he was a little frustrated because our refugee section became the largest section of the embassy, and we were basically wearing down the embassy motor pool with our frequent journeys out to the refugee camps. And ultimately, we got special funding, and the embassy was put right. But in Thailand, the initial impact was very great on the American embassy there, and I can stress that the American ambassador in those key years, Morton Abramowitz, was very supportive, and that made a big difference, as did leadership from Washington with President Carter and his Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian Affairs, the legendary American diplomat named Richard Holbrooke.
Yeah.
And I guess we should also note that Jimmy Carter and Rosalind had a personal commitment, particularly Rosalind Carter. She visited the refugee camps in the fall of 79, and as the refugees were building up in the region. And she was one of those people who was instrumental in pushing the administration, led by her husband, to increase the number of refugees to the doubling and then redoubling that I mentioned that occurred that year. So she showed a particular commitment and interest in the refugees that is quite commendable.
Okay,
Speak loudly.
what legacy do you think the Indochina boat people made on the world, America, etc.?
Okay, I would take that a little bit broader to say the Indo-Chinese refugees, not just the boat people, but those from Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. I think a couple of things. I think that they proved that the United States would be a welcoming and successful safe haven for refugees who did not have a European background, because our only experience to that date was with refugees from cultures more similar to ours than the East Asian cultures, the Indo-Chinese cultures. And that was a great great accomplishment. So today, until recently, when the refugee program now has been greatly diminished, unfortunately, it extended to being a welcoming country for refugees from Asia and other countries in Asia, as well as Africa and Latin America. I think the Indo-Chinese refugee flow broke that barrier down with the success of the refugees from Indochina. And it, I think, operated the same way with the other countries, primarily European and France, and because they had been involved in Indochina, and then other Western-oriented countries like Australia and Canada and New Zealand all took significant numbers and all had similar experiences. And one of your questions, your fourth question that you had sent me, was how did these countries cooperate to help the refugees? And the answer is that we worked very closely to make sure that refugees who had ties to any particular country were guided to that country. We didn't want to take refugees to the United States who had close ties to communities in France or Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. And we ultimately ensured that we had the widest number of refugees resettled abroad by coordinating closely in frequent meetings with these countries of resettlement to keep the doors open for the maximum number of refugees to resettle, and also to put pressure on the countries of refuge in the region to take the refugees in temporarily, because there was this international effort involving not just the U.S., but other countries as well, to take in the refugees on a continuing basis. So, yes, there was close cooperation as among the countries of resettlement, and the UNHCR played a role in this as well, the UN Refugee Agency.
That was what I was going to ask, if it was the UN or a branch of that was cooperating or helping coordinate.
Yes, we felt initially that the UN was slow to react to this whole problem. I think it was seen as an outgrowth of the American war effort, that they had other issues around the world. Getting them interested and involved in a constructive way meant that they had to greatly increase the number of personnel that they assigned in Thailand and elsewhere in the region, Malaysia, etc. But ultimately, they came on board, and they were the international face of refugees being resettled in the United States, and they played a useful role, and ultimately, as I said, got the Nobel Prize as a symbol of the international gratitude and appreciation for the Indochina refugee problem having been addressed so well. As I indicated earlier, that was primarily based on what the U.S. and other countries had actually done. But yes, the UN High Commission for Refugees, known as UNHCR, did play the overall international lead role from the United Nations side.
Other questions?
Okay, what was the short and long-term impact?
Well, as I said, I think that the short-term and long-term impacts were both pretty favorable, despite apprehension as to how they would work out, that the refugees did prove that they were assets to our country and were assimilating very well. And certainly over the long term, that as I indicated earlier, their economic success in contributing to the economy and culture of the United States was very much welcome. I think the diversity that they brought, from Vietnamese cooking to the farmers markets to the crafts that they have been selling, all were net pluses and welcomed by American society. So I think it was a great experiment in relocating people that worked out well. And as I said, is an encouragement to taking people on an ongoing basis. Unfortunately, the current climate is now going against that. And I shouldn't say climate. The administration policy is to cut way, way back on the number of refugees we take, and we find that to be quite distressing, even heartbreaking, that the United States is not continuing with its role of being a Statue of Liberty welcoming figure for refugees around the world, particularly since the Indo-Chinese and others have shown how much of an asset they are to our country. It's not just being charitable, it also proves that they're an enriching factor in our own society. And we're turning our back from that, hopefully temporarily, when different leaders come into the United States. If that happens, there may be hopefully a change of heart so that refugees will not become sacrificed as they have been now. And we hope for that in the future.
Okay. What is the most important thing you would like to tell us?
Well, again, I want to commend you for your interest in this significant problem. And I think that one book that you would find, if you haven't read it already, it would be an excellent source, would be a book by Larry Thompson on the Indo-Chinese refugees. Are you all familiar with that?
Not yet, but we'll find it.
Good. Well, I'll give you the full title.
Okay.
It's a bulky title, so take your pencils out. Refugee Workers in the Indochina Exodus, 1975-79. And the author is Larry Thompson.
Okay. And it was the Indochina Exodus, and what were the years again, please? I'm sorry.
That's right. It's a bulky title. And that the years are 1979. I have to take the book out now myself.
Sorry.
Years. Hold on. Refugee Workers in the Indochina Exodus, 1975 to 1982.
Thank you.
So it covers the entire period that we've just been talking about,
Okay.
from the fall in Vietnam to the Exodus right through the major years, ending in 1982 in this case, although the flow went on for quite a few years after that. But that would be a major and useful source for you. It also has a bibliography of other sources that you could check into.
Gotcha.
So that would be a great roadmap for you, I think,
Okay.
In your further investigations.
Okay. We'll get on looking for that through either Interlibrary Loan or Amazon. We'll get a copy.
Yes, I know it's available on Amazon. It's rather expensive because unfortunately it got published it should have been a regular nonfiction book. It got published as a university book, and they're always more expensive. But it's well worth the investment, both in terms of what it says and in terms of the bibliography.
Okay. We'll be looking for that, and we'll also got a couple people whose parents are at the university here at K-State, and we can see if that's up at the university library as well, so might have several options.
Yes, it should be in the university library. If it isn't, they should order it. Because it's a major,
they had a fire. They had a fire about Well, they had a fire at the library about a year ago, so everything has been shipped out, and they are supposed to reopen it in November. So we'll see if that is open and ready for us to go to. So, but anyway, other questions, ladies?
Is there anyone else you would recommend that we should contact?
Let me think about that, because a lot of the people that I would have suggested have either passed on by now or have lost touch with the refugee situation, or I've lost touch with them. But I'll ponder that, and if it's all right, I'll email Ms. Seeley and get back to you if I have ideas on that.
Perfect. Okay. Any other thing except what do you need to say? Because this has been you're amazing.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
So much.
No, you kids are amazing. My thanks to you all. I really appreciate it.